My worst account of being a crime scene cleaner is when I was in my mid-20s, I used to do trauma scene cleanup work. I was basically in charge of a crew that would go in after homicides, suicides, unattended deaths, accidents, and well, all manner of deaths or accidents that would cause damage to building structures. This one time we got a call to a scene, and most of the time we were giving very little details as to the call, mostly because we received our information secondhand either from a public agency like a coroner or the fire department. We arrived on scene and there is an older woman sitting in a garage with the big garage door open. She has a garage set up like a room with a sofa, TV, fridge and bed. Normally I would give the next of kin the option of showing us where the scene is or letting us know if there's anything of concern like a family heirloom or something valuable that we can pull out for them. She stopped me and said, "I don't want to go inside that house. There is evil inside that house." Immediately I started to get the feeling of mental health issues, but she then sat me down and started telling me a story about her family, and the way she was talking was like a warning, like she was warning me about what was inside. She said that 3 years prior, her husband had killed himself in that house, and then 2 years later her eldest son killed himself inside the house too. This time, it was her youngest son who had killed himself inside the house. She was telling me about the evil that lurks in the house and how she pleaded with her husband to move away from it. She told me that there was nothing in that house that she wanted, and after we were done, she was leaving and never coming back, and that a family friend was coming from up north to get her. When we entered the house, we were only wearing a part of our PPE, but we didn't don our masks yet as we'd heard that the death had been a stabbing. The smell inside the house was full of decay, like rotten meat, bitter and almost sweet. There were flies everywhere, but not from the room that the suicide occurred. That room, the son had cut his throat and wrote on the wall, then eventually collapsed. He also drank poison and there was a mixture of vomit and chemical ooze. We hurried up and did our cleaning work and then got the heck out of there. That one will always stick with me, but I do have to wonder if there was some truth to what that woman was saying. It's been a while since I posted about the suicide house, but I've had several questions for more stories about my experiences in the field of trauma scene work. Now, I know my stories aren't scary and the haunted or serial killer type sense, but the fact is most people couldn't handle walking into a scene like many of the ones I've been to. We actually have to be very careful at how we train crew members who worked on such scenes. It was often a volunteer basis for working on those types of scenes, meaning we didn't force anyone to go into a house where the dad killed all the children before blowing his brains out in the lazy boy. We didn't just start somebody in training and then go, "Oh, by the way, we're going to a multiple homicide." Anyway, if there was a way to describe some of the sights and smells of doing this type of work, I'm sure you'd see how truly scary or messed up all of this is. First of all, I have to say that suicide is not glamorous, nor is it ever over for those around you. If you need help, please get help. Don't let your loved ones find you that way. It not only changes them, but changes the feeling inside the house. Anyway, back to my story. This took place in the late 1990s. Just before I got out of the field, we got a call to dispatch a crew out to a house, and we were told that there was at least one death. Sometimes that's all we're told, and we often don't get the full story, but then sometimes we would see the true story on the evening news or a neighbour that talks too much. We arrive at this house, a modest house, not really a high-end home, but not low-end either. It was a 2-story home about midway into a cul-de-sac street. As with some scenes, there's a cluster of neighbours outside who were looking at who we are and why we are there. The sheriff department had just released the scene, so all of the crime scene investigators had already done their job as I approached the house. I noticed a ton of what looked like bullet holes in the stucco, broken glass and a long blood stain on the driveway. We went inside and had to suit up almost immediately, as the police had probably used tear gas. There were blood stains all over. It looked as though someone had been dragged through the house with blood gushing. There were several areas that had pulled up blood, where things kind of looked like explosions happened, to which I assumed flashbangs were used, or maybe the guy inside had shot up. Probably what strikes you the most in these situations is like how benign the underneath looks. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but just imagine, if you will, a place looking like the inside of a home mould, straight out of a TV set of Full House. Now imagine the same TV set but with blood smeared and bullet holes and tons of broken glass. I mean, they seemed like a very normal family. So what actually happened? Well, from what we could piece together from news reports and what neighbours wanted to talk to us about while we were cleaning his blood off the driveway, and from the scene itself, was that the dead apparently went crazy. He'd been talking about demons. Not like I got my own demons, but actual demons. He was sure that he was being attacked by demons and the devil. And he was convinced that they were trying to take his soul and the souls of his family. So rather than let the demons take his family, he killed them so that they could go to heaven, and he ended up barricading himself in the house. It looked like some family members tried to get away after being shot and stabbed, but one collapsed in the kitchen, and one escaped somehow, and one was pulled out by the police. He had apparently ended up shooting back at the police, and the neighbourhood was evacuated for blogs. At least that's whatever everyone on the street was saying. In the end, he escaped the house, ended up on the roof, still shooting back, and then he was finally shot fatally dead by the police. And then he fell from the roof, and that's his blood that we were cleaning from the driveway. He murdered his wife. One of his older children later died in the hospital, and one of the kids was killed inside the house. The one that escaped, and I think another family member that lived with them, was unharmed, as they were not in the house when all of this actually started going down. It took us a lot longer to clean this scene, as there were so many holes and we had to remove almost all of the carpet and soft surfaces due to the tear gas. It was a terrible scene inside. I know this might come across as religious or whatever, but I've come across enough of these scenes and you really start to believe that evil does exist. So a lot of people have been asking me about more of the crime scene cleanup work that I did. I remember back to one of my first calls. When I first started doing this work, it had to be around 1994. One of the first calls I did was to a really, really rich, fancy home. The home was located in a very wealthy area of Los Angeles, up in the hills area. It was a huge home, with a lot of land surrounding it. This was the first time I ever saw an elevator in a house. I never met the homeowner or any actual representative from the person who owned the house, as all of the paperwork was done by fax. I think it was owned by an Asian family, but I couldn't be 100% sure. I only thought this at the time due to the furnishings and stuff inside the home. The home was pretty much emptied out of most of the personal contents prior to our arrival, so I didn't see any family photos on the walls. The home was so huge that you could get lost inside. Up to this point, I'd never been inside a multi-level home, much less one with so many bedrooms, a game room, indoor pool, bar, dens, family rooms, basements, and I think a 6-car garage, if I remember correctly. Anyway, we started work on this one really late in the evening. It was once a crime scene, but by the time it was released to us, there were other damages that I just couldn't explain. I assumed that the person was killed in the master bedroom, as there were some signs of trauma and some bullet holes in the bathroom and shower and the surrounding walls. Not much blood and that kind of stuff to clean up, as I think the person must have died in the huge walk-in shower. What was odd was that I don't really know if the shooter turned on all the water faucets in the house, because there was water damage all throughout the house, kind of like Home Alone stuff. There were areas where we had to remove wet drywall, wet carpets, baseboards, wood flooring, wet ceilings, cabinets. Since all this was all over the huge house and my crew at the time were just about 5 of us, we split up, doing different areas each. The house was so big that you couldn't even hear each other from the different areas that you were in, even if you were screaming. But we all carried those old Motorola walkie-talkies that we could call and communicate with each other for miles with. One of the issues we were dealing with was that in certain areas of the house, the lights were off, and I think prior to us coming out, an electrician shut off the power in different areas because electrical components got wet. We all decided that using the elevator wasn't a good idea, and we just used the stairs and walking through the different areas of the home. It was completely dark. We thought about getting our generator out, but the house was too big and there were just so many rooms, so we just ran extension cords with the light to areas that we needed it at, but this still didn't light up enough of the house. I remember 2 of our guys were working upstairs, and I think you'd probably call it the 3rd or 4th floor, the area where the murder took place. another guy was working by himself in what looked like a bar, indoor nightclub area, removing wet cabinets and flooring. Another guy was working on this huge wall in the closet, tearing out wet carpet and drywall from ceiling to the floor. And I started working in the basement area. There was some ceiling and walls that needed to be removed. This job was going to be an all-nighter because of the vast areas and multiple areas that all had damage. We kept finding more and more, and also everything that we removed that was damaged was a long trek to take it out of the house and down the drive to our trucks. So why is this a scary or creepy story, you might ask? Well, imagine being in this huge home where a murder took place, for one. But as we got on through the night, working, we started hearing and experiencing things. Our old radios would do a beep beep chime when someone was about to say something over the air. Since it was only our companies that had these radios, it wasn't random interference from outside sources, and we hadn't experienced such things before. But as the night went on and we were working, we kept getting alerts that someone was about to talk. So I and the others would drop what we were doing and listen for after the beep beep, but like someone was about to say something, but no one spoke. Okay, so maybe the guys were fooling around with the radios. I don't know. I was making my way with a trash can of debris out of the basement, as I didn't want to make my trash too heavy to carry out, so I made several loads. And it was a summer night as well, so getting out in the cool summer air was also a benefit. One of these trips I had to go up the stairs from the basement and down a long hallway, and on my right, I believe, there was an opening to a large living room type room, and to my left there were some windows to the outside, but further down was the door that I needed to take out to the exit and take my debris out. On one of these trips, the lights suddenly all went out, and I got some light from the moon outside, but to my right, the rest of the house seemed unnaturally dark. As I made my way back to the truck, I grabbed a small flashlight just in case it happened again. Anyway, after a while of working on my own in the basement area, one of my guys comes up to me and starts chatting. I can tell he's nervous. And he starts on me saying, wouldn't it be better if we worked together? That way we can finish up areas quicker. I could tell that he didn't want to be by himself, so I agreed. And honestly, I knew how he felt. At about 1 a.m, we all decided to take a break and meet in the pool table to have a snack. We started exchanging stories about the place, mostly on how cool it was, but also how creepy it was. We'd all experienced random whole areas of the house losing power for it only to come back on, and then again in a different section. The guys that were upstairs talked about hearing music, but they couldn't find the source. I brought up the whole walkie-talkie thing and asked who the dumbass was who kept hitting the talk button. Apparently, according to them, no one did. We started coming to the realization that the job wasn't going to be completed tonight, and it would be a 2 or 3 day job. We talked about our options, and since it was nearly 2 a.m. at that point, one of them was that we should work a few more hours and then sleep there, and then get up and go for a shower, and then get back to the office. I, for one, wasn't into the idea of sleeping in a house, and overruled and said we'll work a couple more hours and just call it a day. The following day, we already had another job on the books, so we got home and rested for a little bit, then go back to the big fancy house at about 3 p.m. We decided to work as long as we could, then finish it up the following day. That evening, we sent one of the guys for pizza, and we kept working there. So there was 2 of us paired up, and one had gone off for pizza. When the pizza came back, we took a break and rested up just before getting back to it. I know this is drawn out, but for the things that happened next, to this day, I'm not sure if it was us being super tired and sleep deprived or if something else was going on in that house. After we ate our dinner and once again back in the pool table room, we were just relaxing as the working distances in this house was taking a toll on us. We decided the best case, so that none of us gets too tired lugging the trash, is that we would split the duty. One guy would go, then come back, and then another guy would go and come back, and so forth. Like that. Almost everyone has music playing at some point in the house. I heard it walking down from the kitchen area to that long hallway, but it sounded like it was coming from another location in the house. Another guy heard it coming from upstairs in the master bedroom area, but when you got up there, it just sounded like it was somewhere else. Okay, just music, so no big deal. One of our guys called us over on the radio, and as he was making his way back from taking debris out to the trucks, he asked if someone was over in the kitchen pantry room. None of us were, so we told him no, and we asked why. He said that the door was wide open and it wasn't before. We joked with him that he was probably hungry. It was about midnight at this point, and I was working in one of the extra bedrooms that had its own private bathroom. This area was down a long hallway that had a few other rooms, and ended in a den-type area. I was with one of my guys and we both jumped as we heard a sudden loud bang. It sounded like something big and flat hit the ground, kind of like if you knocked over a large piece of furniture. I got on the radio and checked on my guys thinking they broke something, but everyone said that they didn't break anything and no one else heard the sound. My co-worker and I definitely did hear it. So we went down the hallway to look around. Maybe a picture fell from the wall or something, but nothing. On one of the last trips from that area, my co-worker took the debris to the truck and I was left all alone in the room, waiting for him to return. And then, without warning, all the lights go out, and I'm sitting here in this room in the dark. The entire room is pitch black, and there's not even enough moonlight to see a single silhouette. I started to make my way out of the room, going down to the den area that led to a larger open room, and then from there to a living room, and then the dining room, and then onto the kitchen. And I start to see light from the pool table room, so I start to make my way over there. And then those lights go out too. I get on my radio and I call out that the lights on the second floor have all gone out. I started to hear someone walking towards me, coming from the living room area, and thinking it was my co-worker, I called out to him, but I didn't get a response. I stood there in silence, and then I started to see a flashlight moving around. And it's another co-worker. He said that in his area the lights were on and he heard me yelling for him. But the thing is, I didn't yell. I had only called him on the radio. Just as we were talking, the lights came back on. My co-worker with the trash can and the flashlight comes back in. The last and final day we go out to finish, I cancelled our schedule so that we could finish the job in the light of day. No more evenings or middle of the night working, or even being in that house. After we were all done, we started exchanging stories about it, and one guy says that he swears he heard me yell for him. I promise I didn't. The lights turning on and off was everywhere. It wasn't like it was an electrical issue, it was like someone was messing with us. One guy said he went to use one of the only functioning restrooms and he seen someone walk by when he opened the door, and it wasn't one of us. One of our guys claimed he heard footsteps in another room. We all heard the music. And one thing about the music is that we all heard a different type. I heard what sounded like classical music, like Chopin or Mozart. But another one of my colleagues said he heard country music, but he couldn't make out any of the lyrics. But then another one of my colleagues said he heard what sounded like mariachi music, or something the type you'd hear in a Mexican restaurant. This was by far one of the weirdest experiences we'd ever had.